With less than a week until the first presidential debate, Donald Trump is pushing back at Hillary Clinton's claim that his rhetoric has become a recruiting tool for Islamic State militants. After this weekend's bombings in New York and New Jersey, Clinton accused Trump of offering, quote, aid and comfort to extremists. On Tuesday, Trump fired back.
Look at what's going on. We have to use common sense. We have to be smart. We have to be tough. We have to be vigilant. Her claim that my opposition to radical Islamic terrorism is a recruiting tool. So how does that have to do with, I'm being tough. Why is that a recruiting? I'm much tougher than her on this horrible situation. But she goes around saying it's a recruiting tool. You know, somebody gave her that from Madison Avenue. You know what, that's advertising. They gave her that they said, let's call it a recruiting tool. But why? Because I'm tough, it's a recruiting tool? It demonstrates a level of ignorance about the terror threat that really is disqualifying for a person seeking the presidency. When she says my opposition to radical Islamic terror provides aid and comfort to the enemy, we know that Hillary Clinton has once again demonstrated that she's really unfit for office.
Philip Bump is a reporter with the Washington Post joining us now. Philip, the conversation until Saturday was about the candidate's health, and then it was Trump also renouncing his birther comment to some degree.
Sure.
How has that conversation changed now?
Well, it's interesting because I think that what happened in New York over the weekend, it certainly was a dramatic event. You know, we have seen a renewed conversation around Islamic State and renewed conversation around terrorism. But I don't know that it's really changed the tenor of the campaign that much. I mean, I think we've seen in this campaign, the subject matter changes very, very rapidly. There's a lot of fluidity to it. This is now something that's being talked about. But I don't get the sense that this is the sort of thing that's really shifting the trajectory of where the campaign's headed.
As far as the first debate, though, has this shifted maybe how much focus will be on terrorism and safety?
Yeah, I mean, I think it'll be hard for them not to focus on that. But I think what's interesting about this is that traditionally Republicans have an advantage on things like foreign policy, on safety in that regard. But I don't think that's the case here. Now, if you look at polling, Clinton and Trump do about as well on the issue of terrorism. Trump does a little better on the issue of the Islamic State. But I think it's because people are genuinely concerned about Trump's temperament. And if Hillary Clinton brings to the table a lot of experience in this field, that I think evens out a lot of the traditional imbalance between the parties.
Trump mocked Clinton on Tuesday for not making public events, and she's been focusing on obviously preparing for the debate. I think he said she needs to rest. Do voters actually care about this absence? We know she was off the trail, obviously dealing with pneumonia.
Right.
But at this point, do they care that she's not out there?
I don't think so. I mean, if there's one thing America is not clamoring for, it's seeing more of politicians, right? But I mean, I think it is the case that it doesn't do her good to not be out there campaigning. There's a reason you campaign. You campaign to get your face out there, to get your message out in the media. We've seen she wasn't on the campaign trail a lot over the past month. Her poll numbers slipped over that time. You know, those things are correlated. I'm not sure how linked they are, but it's clear that she'd be better off out there doing more events.
Well, in talking with Nancy Cordes earlier, it was sort of the idea from the campaign that so much is focused on the debate because that will matter most. Is that the case, that it's sort of what's happened lately? The most recent thing is what will be in voters' minds?
Well, it is, but also so many people will be watching the debate, right? I mean, we tend to overestimate the extent to which people pay attention to these little things. I mean, you and I spend all day talking about this, right?
We're aware
Not
of
everyone
everything,
does,
right?
exactly.
What?
But the debate, everyone's going to watch, and so that is where place she really needs to do well. And, you know, it's a very tricky balance because she clearly has more experience and knowledge than Donald Trump, but she also has to be very careful in how she comes off. It'll be fascinating to watch.
Over the past week, we've seen a lot of reporting about Donald Trump's foundation and questions about that foundation. And it goes back to the issue of transparency. Is the focus on him the same for transparency as it has been on Hillary Clinton in regards to her emails and his foundation?
Well, it's an interesting comparison in part because the email story is out there, but keeps coming back in part because it's a function of the government, and they release emails, and then there's this report from the FBI.
That's
so it keeps coming exactly, without necessarily advancing the story very much. The Washington Post, Dave Farenthold, has done a lot of great work on the foundation. He just keeps finding new things. So I don't know that it is an issue of transparency so much as it is, this is the background that we have to look at, and I think it raises a lot of questions about Trump's tax returns, right? Because we don't get to see those. We do get to see these filings from the foundation, and there's a lot in there that I think a lot of other candidates would be suffering a lot more from those revelations.
I asked Major, is this sort of the pressure that is needed to get Donald Trump to release his tax returns? I also think, will anything get him?
No, it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he has a great excuse, which is this thing about the audits. It's impossible to reject that. You know, a lot of people have been asking for a long time. Clearly, he's worried about what would come out with these tax returns, what it would show from his, how
His
much
son
he
has
pays in taxes.
said that.
Exactly, which I think is.
It was an interesting post that you had in the Washington Post, a story about the words that American adults associate with each campaigns. For Clinton, it's what we mentioned before. Email.
Right. Yeah, I mean, consistently. So this is polling from Gallup. Gallup gets on the phone every week, talks to voters. What do you hear? Did you see something in the news about one of the candidates? They ask, and if so, what was that? So for Trump, it's been a range of things. When he met with the Mexican president, that was there. During the convention, that was the thing. But for Clinton, every week, week after week, email. And I think that there are a few reasons for that. One of them is that there isn't a whole lot else going on with her campaign, right? I mean, again, she was off for a month, essentially. She wasn't doing a lot of campaigning, so that was the thing that was in the news. And then Donald Trump constantly is throwing new things out there, and so I think those get people's attention.
Is there an advantage, one way or another, to have one thing always associated with you versus a variety?
Well, given the fact that her poll numbers have slipped over the course of the past month, at least relative to Trump, I would say it's disadvantageous to have this one negative thing be the constant thing people are thinking about.
Philip Bump with the Washington Post, thank you.
Of course.